And so it was really important to keep everything very simple, very low tech. So when these facilities get built in Indonesia, they will be built by Indonesians for Indonesians. So it's about creating employment, training, and then they become educators. And so there is like a snowball
so they
effect.
can educate another.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And this is all possible if there is support.
Support, yeah. Of course, we need support.
Yeah. Various, no, I don't, it's just building 1 or 2 pilot projects. People can see, we have media there, Andrew's explaining this, what happens. And of course, when the first pilot project starts, I'm actually training 4 people to run it, okay? And so they become the spokesperson. In turn, become basically, you know, implementing and building these. There is no, the royalty towards me in this space of communities in Indonesia, the royalty financially is really, really, really small. But I'm interested in working in resorts because that creates revenue for me to take this globally, if that makes sense.
It really makes sense for me, of course. And okay, back to my question. So we talk about waste. So I'm so curious, how we manage it properly.
So if we're going to manage the waste properly, as I said before, we need to own what is the problem in waste. So the biggest problem Indonesia has is maybe plastics.
Yeah.
Okay. Remember plastics. Plastic as a material is actually brilliant, but the problem is that 98% of it is single use. Single use. And that ends up in landfill. So this whole conversation is happening full pelt around the world. And so when you have these plastic glasses with plastic thing and a plastic straw, this is slowly being banned very quickly in the last 2-3 years around the world. So we have a waste on plastic being the big one, all over Indonesia. People do not understand what happens when you throw plastic in the water, in the river, on the road. They have little understanding of the environmental consequence. So again, government need to lead here to think about what can we do. So for instance, I was at a particular hotel last night as a guest speaker. There would have been 50 people in there and there would have been maybe 100 water bottles, plastic water bottles. And what they could have had outside the door is a water tower, you pull the lever, a water tower, and have glass jug of water. And everyone just had glasses of water. And at every table there was a jug of water. And we just pour the water and we drink it from a glass. But we had not from the plastic. So for government and industry, like parents to a child, they need to lead by example. Lead by example. So hotel chains in America, and Europe and Australia, particularly in Europe, they're banning all of this. Plastic bottles. They're going back to old ways. So we have this big plastic water bottle that gets reused. Yeah. Again, this whole area of the waste stream is extensively documented around the world. So if Indonesia is going to introduce policy, there is so much information available to implement strategies and policies, working with government and community to slow this down, to slow the waste stream down. So I can just say this, maybe it's a bit out of context. What we have in the world at the moment, we have large amount of population that are borderline in poverty to the extreme and starvation at about 800 million currently. At the same time, in the Western world, like Europe, to a certain degree, small degree in Indonesia, but particularly in America, particularly in Australia,
Mm-hmm.
there is this category of called obesity. And obesity is where people are carrying maybe 10 kilos too much weight. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that has huge health consequences.
Yeah.
Yeah. Diabetes, cancer, goes on and on. And so what people, science in the area of social science and medicine, are finding out that more people are dying. It's at the tipping point. People are dying being overly excessive weight, that overfeeding, opposed to the people that are dying. So you have thousands, millions of people around the world that are obese and they actually have health conditions and dying of those health conditions because they're overweight. So again, it's about education.
It sounds dramatic, but I think it
We-
happened.
Yeah,
right?
we need to have these conversations.
Uh-huh.
And so for me, it's about Indonesia now being a part of the global information highway, because there's so much information that Indonesia can pull in willingly to create policy.
Summary is
Yeah,
already
yeah.
information
Yeah.
to make policies about that.
Correct.
I wish my government hear this.
Well, I mean, the nice thing is, and I say this here, is the fact that Ade was asked to come here and speak with you,
Yeah.
and the crew behind the cameras here also learning. They're filming, they're at work, but they're learning. But these sort of conversations to me are really, really important. And as I've said to you personally, you are the future of Indonesia, and your children will be. And you should not be inheriting the problems that Indonesia faces today, yesterday, and definitely not tomorrow. So Indonesia is a global trading partner. There are lots of wonderful student exchanges occurring with Indonesia all over the world. If Indonesia opens itself up to look at policy and education from around the world, I have no question that places like Australia would assist. Indonesia's population is large and it's diverse. And the impact is very evident. I'm talking with emotion and concern because in my lifetime, certainly in the last 40 years, I've seen so much alarming issues, environmental issues. And Indonesia really needs to protect Indonesia, to preserve Indonesia. It has to be a part of the global community to protect itself in the environment.
Especially.
Yeah. And in the case of landfill waste, it is up there with the top 3 big problems that Indonesia faces today. Some people would say number 1. I would say between number 1 and number 2. Because we're talking about if the soil is degrading, you won't grow food.
Yeah.
You won't have clean water. You won't have clean seafood. Yeah. So the health
Change everything.
is compromised in the environment, culture. Indonesia is an amazing rich culture. I find it slightly insulting to all the Indonesian indigenous communities that have lived relatively in harmony with nature. And I find that not only in Indonesia, this is all over the world, and this is very evident in Australia. When I talk critically about Indonesia, I'm always acknowledging that Indonesia is not alone here. It is a big issue worldwide. But Indonesia does have its specific issues that is of great concern. I have to say.
So back to you just said about the policies, right?
Yeah.
So I want to ask you about what is the direction and policy of the government, the right policies. What kind of the best policies to fix this
Okay.
problem?
So the best policy to fix this problem, and I'm just going back here again, they need to own the problem.
On the problem.
The government, they've got to be united. All the political parties of Indonesia, religious and non-religious, need to acknowledge that we have this big problem.
Like they have to know it's.
No, it's a big issue. That's it.
That's a big issue.
This is an issue that's having a huge, massive impact on Indonesia's future, now and tomorrow. As soon as they do that, then they say, well, they all unite and say, we have a problem here. Then they need to think about what are the solutions. Okay, so those solutions are abundant, as I've mentioned to you before, that other countries have dealt with.
Yeah.
So there's many policies and campaigns to deal with this that countries would have access to Indonesia. So I'm stressing this again. If they acknowledge that, it's a huge problem. And they have to own it. That's the first thing. And that's the big one. As soon as they own it, then the solutions start to create automatically. We need to sort out what are the problems. Indonesia needs to have a policy or a group of people that are environmental educators, environmental researchers, but also protecting the economy of Indonesia. Yeah. So it's a joint, collaborative, serious commitment that Indonesia is going to create a strategy, every strategy for the first 3 years, strategy for the next 3 years, and it goes on for the next 20 years. And they need to achieve those goals, a bit like climate change around the world. They're realizing they haven't got that time frame, and they're bringing that time frame, as Australia has recently been here in Makassar 3 days ago, that their number one agenda now is climate change. And they also acknowledge that if they embrace it, they're creating green industry. So it's a form of green economy, a new form of economy, but it's to the betterment of everyone. So policy change has to occur if the will and the reality for them that it is a problem, and then start implementing policy. And then they're going to itemize what are the big problems here. And so the big ones are you have manufacturers producing products that are single use. And what are other countries doing about that? What have they done? So there's lots of ways
We learn from
other countries because they are about maybe 10 years ahead of Indonesia. But this is critical in Australia. It's critical and very critical. Europe probably is leading here. So there's lots of things they can do, but you have a large population in Indonesia that has low education, okay? And that is a big part of the problem. That whole process of learning and creating education has to be, it won't be as fast as it would be in Europe, America, Australia, through TV, through radio, through news articles. This has to be a campaign that starts in the country or starts in the city, and there is sufficient support to help and guide.